Rebecca Pruitt was counting her last pennies in the dark barn when the flour sack beside her folded flat as an empty stomach. Her hands trembled so hard the coins clicked like teeth in winter. By sunup, Mercy Ben would want bread she could not bake, and Silas Crane would come smiling with a marriage contract, saying hunger made a woman sensible. 2 orphan children slept in the loft. Her dead father's debts hung on her name, and no one would extend credit to a baker with a ruined reputation. Then a quiet shadow filled the barn doorway, and Simon Hawthorne saw every coin, every tear she had tried to hide. Before the dust rises, write your country in the comments so I know where this story found you. If you enjoy lonely cowboys, brave women, and love that heals old wounds, subscribe for the next tale. By the time Rebecca Pruitt's shame became town property, the morning bell over Haskell's Mercantile had not even finished ringing. She stood at the counter with a list folded in one hand and her other hand wrapped tight around a little drawstring purse that held less than $1. There were 6 people behind her, though it felt like 60. Mrs. Abel from the church, 2 ranch hands from the bar, a widow with a blue bonnet, a freight driver chewing tobacco slow as judgment, and old Mr. Haskell himself, tall and narrow behind the counter, rubbing his thumb over the page where Rebecca's name had been written too many times. "Flour," Rebecca said softly. "£10 if you please. Yeast, if you have it. Molasses, just a small measure." Mr. Haskell did not reach for anything. He looked at the ledger again, then at her purse. "You paying today?" The store went quiet in a way that made the floorboards sound alive. Rebecca felt heat climb from her collar to her cheeks. She had spent 3 years behind her father's bakehouse counter, smiling through smoke, heat, sore feet, and the sort of tiredness that made bones feel hollow. She knew every family in Mercy Ben by the loaves they bought. The Wilkes boys liked hard rolls. Mrs. Hobart wanted soft white bread for her husband's bad teeth. The schoolchildren sometimes pressed pennies into her palm and asked for broken sugar biscuits after lessons. But knowing people did not mean they would stand beside you. "I can pay a portion," she said, "and the rest after Saturday market. I have orders coming due." "You had orders last week," Mr. Haskell said. A man behind her gave a low cough that might have been a laugh. Rebecca kept her eyes on the counter. "I did." Mr. Hollis canceled the funeral bread when his sister came from Laramie with her own cook, and Mrs. Crowley said she would settle after harvest. "Harvest is not a bank note." "No, sir." He turned the ledger around. Her father's name had once been written in a bold hand at the top of the page. Nathaniel Pruitt, Bakery and Oven. Beneath it were amounts, additions, dates, crossings out, and new amounts Rebecca had not known about until after his burial. Her father had been kind, trusting, and proud enough to hide a failing business from his only daughter. When fever took him in March, the debt remained, and every sack of flour since then had tasted of it. Mr. Haskell tapped the page. "I told your father I would carry him through winter." "I did. I told you I would carry you through spring." "I did that too. Now here we are in October, and I am not a charity. No, sir, I cannot put more on credit." Rebecca heard Miss Abel whisper, "That girl should have sold the ovens when she had the chance." The freight driver answered, "Or married when Crane offered." Rebecca's fingers tightened around the purse until the beads cut her palm. Silas Crane had offered. The whole town knew it. Silas owned a livery, half the freight wagons, and more debt papers than a decent man should want. He had come to the bakery 2 weeks after Rebecca buried her father and stood too close beside the flour table, his smile thin and certain. "A woman alone does not need to fight so hard," he had told her. "I could take your debt, your ovens, and your name under my roof. The children, too, if they learn to keep quiet." The children, that was the part nobody spoke of, unless they wished to make Rebecca small. Annie and Caleb Pruitt were not hers by birth. They were her brother's children, left after cholera took him and his wife on the Platte Road. Annie was 8, solemn-eyed and careful. Caleb was 5 and forever hungry, with a cough that deepened whenever cold weather found cracks in the wall. Rebecca had brought them into the rooms behind the bakery, because blood was blood, and because no child ought to be made to ask where home had gone. Now the town looked at them like weights tied to her skirt. Have 37 cents, Rebecca said, and she hated the tremor in her voice. I can take less flour. Mr. Haskell sighed as if she were the one doing him injury. 5 pounds, cash only. No yeast, no molasses. That won't be enough for orders. Then don't take orders you can't fill. A soft sound moved through the store. Not loud, not cruel enough to call out. Worse than that. The little Russell people, made when they were relieved misfortune belonged to someone else. Rebecca counted out the coins. Mr. Haskell weighed flour into a sack no larger than a pillowcase and tied it with twine. He did not meet her eyes when he set it down. She turned to leave, and the door opened before she reached it. Simon Hawthorne stepped inside, bringing with him cold air, dust, and the smell of horse leather. He was not a man people ignored, though he gave them every chance to. Tall, lean, sun-darkened, with broad shoulders under a worn brown coat, Simon carried quiet like a locked gate. He ran cattle west of town on land that had once belonged to his father. He came into Mercy Bend for salt, nails, coffee, and nothing more. He did not linger at socials. He did not sing in church. He did not sit at the hotel supper table unless every other place was taken. Some said he had been born cold. Others said he had become that way after his wife and baby died 7 winters before, in a blizzard that trapped him beyond the pass. Rebecca knew only that Simon Hawthorne bought bread every Tuesday and never complained if the crust was dark. His eyes moved from the flour sack in her arms to her face, then past her to the store's silent crowd. No one spoke. Rebecca ducked her head and slipped around him. The edge of her shoulder brushed his coat, and she felt the steadiness of him, like leaning by accident against a post in high wind. Outside, wind struck her cheeks hard enough to sting. Mercy Bend stretched before her, in a row of false front buildings, hitching posts, mud, and staring windows. A wagon wheel groaned near the blacksmith's shed. 2 boys chased a dog past the trough. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin gray ropes. Rebecca walked fast, clutching the flour sack. She passed the bakery, though the painted sign still read, "Prutt's Bread," in faded blue. The front window was empty except for 3-day-old rolls under it. She could not bear to go in yet. Annie and Caleb were at the schoolhouse, and the rooms would feel too quiet. So she walked to the livery barn, where she had rented a corner stall from old Eli Birch to store extra wood and a cracked flour bin. The bakery's storage shed roof had given way in September rain, and Silas Crane, who owned the livery after buying Eli's deaths, had allowed her to keep supplies there for a fee. He mentioned often and collected whenever he wished to remind her who held the door. The barn smelled of hay, dust, manure, and horses breathing in the dark. Rebecca set the little flour sack on the bin, laid both hands on the rough wood, and bent her head. She did not cry. Not then. Crying took time, and she had dough to stretch, children to feed, ovens to coax, and a town waiting to see if she would fail in public. That evening, she made a thin stew from potatoes, onion ends, and the last strip of salt pork. Annie tore bread into 3 equal pieces and tried to give the largest to Caleb. Caleb, pale from coughing, pushed it back. "You take it," he said. "You got school some's eye." "I'm not hungry," Annie lied. Rebecca pretended not to hear. "Both of you eat. Tomorrow I'll bake cinnamon rolls." "With sugar?" Caleb asked. "With a little sugar," Rebecca said. There was no sugar. After the children slept in the loft above the bakery kitchen, Rebecca lit 1 lamp, tied on her shawl, and carried the coin purse out into the cold. She had counted the money 6 times already, but numbers sometimes changed when a person was desperate. There were pennies in the blue jar near the stove, 2 nickels under the loose floorboard, where her father used to hide emergency cash, and 3 cents Annie had found in the alley and placed proudly in Rebecca's hand. In the livery barn, away from the children's sleeping ears, Rebecca spread the coins on an overturned crate. 1, 2, 3. She whispered each count, because silence made the truth sharper. The barn door creaked in the wind. A horse shifted. Somewhere in the dark, a leather strap tapped against a stall rail. 37 cents had become 51. 51 cents would not buy enough flour for bread, pay the livery storage fee, settle even the smallest part of Haskell's ledger, or purchase the cough syrup Caleb needed before frost settled in his chest. Rebecca pressed both hands over her mouth. That was when the barn door opened. She jerked so hard the pennies scattered. A figure stood in the doorway, hat brim low, shoulders filling the pale strip of moonlight. "Miss Pritt," Simon Hawthorne said. Rebecca rose too quickly, and her knee struck the crate. "Mr. Hawthorne, I did not hear you. I did not mean to frighten you. I was only—" She looked down at the scattered coins, the empty purse, the flour bin with more dust than flour inside it. Pride told her to lie. Exhaustion left her without strength. Counting. His gaze moved over the pennies, the flour sack, the dark corners of the barn, then back to her face. Most men would have offered pity or questions. Simon did neither. He stepped inside, closed the door against the wind, and removed his hat. "I came from my sorrel, Eli," said she through a shoe. "Mr. Birch went home after sundown, I know." Then he stood there, silent. Rebecca knelt to gather the coins with fingers that would not obey. "I can manage," she said. "I reckon you can." The answer startled her more than pity would have. She glanced up. Simon's face was hard to read in lamplight, all shadowed cheekbones and grave eyes, but there was no mockery in him. He crouched, picked up 3 pennies near his boot, and placed them on the crate. He did not touch her hand. "They talked in Haskell's today," he said. Rebecca's throat closed. "I expect they did," she answered. "They were wrong to do it." A broken laugh slipped out of her before she could stop it. "Wrong does not fill an oven, no way." He reached inside his coat. Rebecca stiffened. "Mr. Hawthorne, please don't." He paused. The way he looked at her then was not insulted. It was careful, as if he understood that help could cut if handed poorly. "I buy bread from you," he said, "every week. Yes, I have men at my place who complain when I feed them beans without bread. I did not know you had men. 2 hands. One old cook who quits every second Thursday and comes back every Monday." Despite herself, Rebecca nearly smiled. Simon drew out a folded paper. "Not money. I need bread for the ranch. Steady. Biscuits, too, if you make them. Twice a week through winter. I cannot bake without flour. I know." He set the paper on the crate. "This is an order. Paid in advance." Rebecca stared at it. "Tate, half now. Half at month's end. I don't take charity. I don't give it." The barn seemed to hold its breath. Simon reached into his coat again, took out a small canvas pouch, and set it beside the order. It made a soft, heavy sound against the wood. Not a fortune, but enough. Rebecca's eyes burned. She hated that he saw it. "I can't accept that much." "You can, if the order requires it. No ranch needs that much bread. Mine does now." Her pride rose, wounded and fierce. "People will say you are foolish. People say plenty. They will say worse about me." At that, something changed in his face. Not softness, pain, my bay, under old ice. "I heard worse said about my wife after she died," he said quietly. Rebecca forgot the coins. Simon looked toward the stall shadows. "Folks said if I had loved her proper, I would have been home before the storm," said a man who leaves a woman with child in January. "Deserves an empty house." Some said it quiet. Some said it thinking I did not hear. "I am sorry," Rebecca whispered. He turned back to her. "Talk does not need truth to live. It only needs mouths." Rebecca looked at the canvas pouch again. "I would have to bake before dawn," she said. because work was safer than gratitude. And again before market, I can haul flour tonight. Haskell won't extend credit. I'm not asking him to. She shook her head. Mr. Hawthorne. Simon, he said. The name hung between them. She had known his name for years. Everyone had, but she had never used it. Some names felt too familiar for lonely people. Simon, she said at last, and his eyes lifted to hers. He picked up her empty flour sack. Where do you keep the bigger bags? In the loft bin. But it's empty. Then we'll fill it, He opened the barn door. Moonlight fell over his shoulder. You have orders to bake. I have a wagon. Rebecca stood there a moment, unsure whether to laugh, cry, refuse, or follow. Then she gathered the pennies, tied them in her purse, and took down the larger sack from a nail. By midnight, the town slept under cold stars. But Simon Hawthorne was lifting flour from the back of his wagon into Rebecca Prue's storage corner. He moved without fuss, stacking sacks where rain could not reach them, adding coffee, dried apples, beans, and a small paper twist of sugar. He pretended not to notice her notice. When he filled her bag last, it was not with coins alone. He put in flour, sugar, and a folded order written in his plain hand, making it business enough for her dignity to stand on. Rebecca held the bag against her chest. Thank you, she said. Simon looked uncomfortable with the words, as though gratitude was a language he had forgotten. Bake good bread, he said. I always do, I know. And for the first time since her father died, Rebecca walked back toward the bakery with weight in her arms that did not feel like shame. Morning came with cold light and the smell of yeast. Rebecca had been awake since 2, her hair pinned badly, sleeves rolled, arms dusted white to the elbow. The bakery kitchen glowed with oven heat. Dough rose under cloths, biscuits browned in iron pans. A pot of apple scraps simmered with a stingy spoon of sugar until the room smelled kinder than the world outside. Annie came down the ladder, rubbing her eyes. Are we rich? Rebecca laughed before she could stop herself. No, darling. We are working. Caleb followed, dragging his blanket, his hair sticking in every direction. Is that cinnamon? A little. He looked at the table where a tray of small rolls waited, each glazed thinly enough that Rebecca could count the shine. For us, for the school children, and for us if any are left. Annie's face tightened with the seriousness of a child who had learned to measure hunger against duty. We can eat crust. Rebecca crossed the room and cupped the girl's cheek. You will eat breakfast. But no buts before sunrise. They shared biscuits with apple spread, and Caleb ate 2 before his cough reminded him to slow. Rebecca wrapped a cloth around 6 loaves and 12 biscuits for the Hawthorne ranch, then hesitated over the smallest cinnamon roll. She tucked it into a napkin and placed it in Caleb's hand. His eyes widened. This is a market roll. This is a Caleb roll. Annie smiled down at her plate, and for one small moment, the bakery felt less like a failing business and more like a home with breath in its walls. Rebecca delivered town orders first. Some customers looked surprised to see full baskets. Mrs. Abel peered into the bakery window long enough to count loaves. Mr. Haskell accepted his 2 brown rolls with a stiff nod and no apology. When Rebecca paid him $1 toward the ledger from Simon's advance, he looked at the money as if it had insulted him. Where did it come from? From bread. His eyes narrowed. Bread does not sell before it is baked. It does when someone orders it. I hope you know what you are doing, girl. Rebecca thought of Simon's quiet voice in the barn. I don't give charity. So do I, she said. By late afternoon, she hitched Eli's old mule to a borrowed cart and started toward the Hawthorne place, 6 miles west where the prairie rolled into low cedar ridges. The sky had turned the color of tin, promising weather. Wind tugged at her bonnet and slipped cold fingers beneath her shawl. She had never been to Simon's ranch. She had pictured it as hard and silent as the man himself. But when she reached the main yard, she found a weathered house with a deep porch, a barn larger than the church, and corrals full of cattle breathing steam into the cold. A windmill turned with a tired groan. Chickens scratched near the woodpile. Smoke rose from a crooked chimney. A gray-haired man with a limp came out of the bunkhouse, wiping his hands on a towel. "You the baker?" "I am Rebecca Pruitt." "Figured. I'm Amos. Cook when I'm not quitting." Rebecca almost smiled. "Are you currently quitting?" "Depends on supper." He took the bread basket and sniffed. His face changed with reverence. "Lord have mercy. Real biscuits." 2 ranch hands appeared, one young and red-haired, the other older, with a scar along his jaw. They greeted her politely enough, though curiosity brightened their eyes. Simon came from the barn, leading a bay gelding. He stopped when he saw her, as if the sight of her in his yard had struck some hidden place in him. "Miss Pruitt, your order," she said. "Still warm." Amos had already taken 1 biscuit and burned his fingers on it. "Worth dying for." Simon shot him a look. Amos shrugged. A man should speak truth before death. Rebecca handed Simon the folded account. "I wrote the quantity and cost. The advance more than covers this week and next. I'll bring the balance Saturday. No hurry." "There is hurry. Business is hurry." His mouth twitched faintly. "Yes, ma'am." She looked around the yard. It was orderly, but not tended with any affection. Tools leaned where they had last been used. The porch rail sagged. A child's swing hung from 1 cottonwood branch, the rope gray with age, the seat split down the middle. No child had used it in years. Simon followed her gaze and went still. Rebecca looked away at once. "I should return before dark. I'll ride with you." "That is not necessary. The road washes near Miller Creek." "Weather coming." "I have driven a cart before." "I reckon you have." There it was again. No argument, no doubt in her ability. Just a steady standing near the edge of danger. He saddled the bay while she pretended to check the mule harness. The ride back was quiet at first. Simon kept his horse at the cart's left wheel, close enough to help if the mule spooked, far enough not to crowd her. The first drops of rain began at the creek. Rebecca clicked her tongue to the mule. The animal stepped into the muddy ford, hooves slipping among stones. Water rushed higher than she expected, brown from upstream rain. The cart lurched. A basket slid. Simon was out of the saddle before she could cry out. He caught the mule's bridle and guided him, boots sinking in water to the shin. "Easy," he said, not to Rebecca but to the mule. "Easy now." The cart climbed the far bank. Simon followed, soaked and expressionless. "You're wet," Rebecca said foolishly. He looked down at his trousers. "So I am. You did not need to do that." The mule disagreed. She pulled the cart to a stop beneath a cottonwood while rain thickened. Simon mounted again, but water dripped from his coat and hat brim. "You will take cold," she said. "I've been colder." The words were simple, but grief passed through them like a shadow through lamplight. Rebecca thought of his wife, his baby, the storm, the empty house waiting after. "What was her name?" she asked before fear could stop her. Simon's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That was not my place." For a long while there was only rain on leaves and the creak of cart wheels. "Ellen," he said at last. The baby was Ruth. Rebecca held the reins gently. "Those are beautiful names." He did not answer. She did not press. At the edge of town, Simon stopped. Mercy Ben's windows glowed ahead, every pane an eye. "You need not ride farther," Rebecca said. "They'll talk." He looked toward the town, then at her. I expect they will." "You don't care." "I care." His voice was rougher than before. "I just don't obey it much anymore." He rode beside her down the main street, anyway. People saw. Of course they did. Mrs. Abel paused outside the church with her basket. Mr. Haskell looked through his mercantile window. Silas Crane stood under the livery awning, black coat buttoned, gloved hands resting on his cane, though he did not need one. His eyes moved from Rebecca to Simon, then to the cart. When Rebecca climbed down behind the bakery, Simon dismounted and lifted the empty baskets from the cart. "I can do that?" she said. I know. He carried them inside anyway. Annie and Caleb froze near the stove. Caleb had a slate in his lap. Annie held a mending needle. This is Mr. Hawthorne, Rebecca said. He buys bread from us. Caleb stared at Simon's eye. Do you eat all of it? Not alone. Good, Caleb said. That would make you sick. Simon blinked. Rebecca pressed her lips together. Annie stood and gave a small curtsy, too formal for a child in a patched dress. How do you do, sir? Fair, Simon said. After an awkward pause, he added, How do you do? Fair, Annie echoed. Caleb pointed to his slate. Rebecca says if I learn sums, I can count money better than Mr. Haskell. Caleb, Rebecca warned softly. Simon looked at the boy. That is a useful skill. Do you cowboys count? Cattle, feed, fence posts, mistakes? Rebecca heard the last word and glanced at him. Simon set the baskets on the table. His gaze moved to the cracked wall, the small stove, the children's narrow beds visible in the loft shadows, the tidy poverty Rebecca fought each day to keep from becoming despair. He reached into his pocket and took out a peppermint stick wrapped in paper. Found this in my coat. Rebecca knew very well peppermint did not find itself in a cowboy's coat. Simon held it out, then stopped, looking at her first for permission. That small pause undid her more than the gift. She nodded. Caleb accepted it with both hands. Annie broke it carefully in half before Rebecca could tell her to. Simon watched the children share it. Something in his face went distant and wounded. Then he put on his hat. Good night, Miss Prout. Good night. Simon, the name, slipped out naturally this time. He heard it. She knew because he paused at the door, not turning, and his hand tightened once on the frame. After he left, Annie leaned close to Rebecca and whispered, He looks sad. Rebecca watched Simon's shadow cross the bakery window and disappear into rain. Yes, she said, he does. By the third week of delivering bread to the Hawthorne ranch, Rebecca understood that Simon's silence was not empty. It was crowded with things he refused to say. She learned this through work, because work made people honest when conversation did not. Simon rose before dawn and expected others to do the same, but he never asked more from a hand than he gave himself. He mended fence in sleet. He carried feed when his hired men were too tired to stand straight. He noticed a lame calf from 50 yards away. He ate whatever Amos served without complaint, even when Amos burned beans black enough to shame Cole. But Simon could not bear disorder in a room that had once belonged to love. The main house kitchen was clean, yet unused in a strange way. Pots hung polished. A blue teacup sat at the back of a shelf with a crack through its handle. Curtains, faded and carefully washed, framed the window over the sink. A small cradle stood in the corner under a white sheet. Rebecca saw it one afternoon when early snow forced her to stay, while Simon repaired the cartwheel. She had brought Annie and Caleb along because the schoolhouse had closed for weather, and Amos insisted they come inside before they froze solid in the yard. Caleb found the cradle first. What's under there? He asked. Rebecca turned from the stove, where she had been warming bread. Caleb, don't touch. But Simon had already entered with an armload of wood. The sound of the boy's question struck him like a thrown stone. He dropped one log. It hit the floor hard. Caleb flinched. Simon's face went white beneath the weathering. Leave it. The words were not shouted, but they cut. Caleb's mouth trembled. Annie stepped in front of her brother. Rebecca wiped her hands on her apron. He meant no harm. Simon looked at the children, then at the cradle, then away. I said, leave it. Silence filled the kitchen. Amos, usually quick with a word, busied himself at the stove. Rebecca's own anger rose, not bright and foolish, but steady. She understood grief. She did. But children should not have to carry the sharp edge of an adult's wound. Caleb, she said gently, come help me count biscuits. The boy obeyed, eyes lowered. Simon left the kitchen. That should have been the end of warmth between them for the day. Might be longer. Rebecca told herself she would deliver bread, take payment, and keep to business. A woman in her position could not afford tenderness toward a man who frightened children, even by accident. But near dusk, she found Simon in the barn, standing alone beside a stall where a mare nosed hay. Snow whispered against the roof. "I owe the boy an apology," he said before she spoke. Rebecca stopped in the aisle. "Joyce," she said. His shoulders moved with a slow breath. "I know. Knowing is not the same as giving it. No." A horse stamped. Rebecca folded her arms against the cold. "He has lost enough adults. He does not need to think every quiet room holds a punishment." Simon closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something raw showed there. That cradle was Ruth's. Ellen painted it blue, because she said girls ought to have sky too. "I have not touched it since the day I came home." Rebecca's anger softened, but she did not let it disappear. "I am sorry for what you lost, truly, but Caleb did not take it from you." Simon bowed his head. "I know that too." The barn smelled of hay and snowmelt. Rebecca wanted to step closer, and because she wanted it, she stayed where she was. "My father borrowed money without telling me," she said. "After he died, I hated him for it. Then I hated myself for hating a dead man. Every time someone opens that ledger, I feel like I am standing over his grave with a shovel. But Annie and Caleb cannot live inside my bitterness. They need bread. They need clean socks. They need someone to laugh when Caleb puts beans in his pocket because he says he is saving for later." Simon's mouth moved, pained, and almost amused. "I'm not good with children," he said. "No one is good with children by avoiding them." That evening, after supper, Simon came into the kitchen where Caleb sat at the table, drawing a horse with legs like fence rails. Simon removed his hat. "Caleb," the boy looked up cautiously. "I spoke rough to you. You did nothing wrong. I am sorry." Caleb studied him with the grave authority of 5 years old. "Was there a baby in there?" Rebecca held her breath. Simon's hand tightened on his hat brim. "There was meant to be." "Oh." Caleb looked down at his drawing. "Our mama had a baby once, but it went to heaven before it got a name. She cried in the wagon." Annie whispered, "Caleb." Simon stood very still. Caleb tore the horse drawing from the slate paper and held it out. "You can have this. It is not a baby, but it is a good horse." For a moment, Simon looked as if he might break in a way no man should break standing up. Then he took the drawing. "Thank you," he said. From then on, something shifted. Not quickly, not like a door thrown open, more like a frozen latch towing beneath a patient hand. Rebecca began staying longer on delivery days when weather turned poor. She helped Amos make bread pudding from old biscuits and showed him how not to kill yeast with water too hot. Annie learned to gather eggs from the ranch hens. Caleb followed the red-haired hand, Tommy, and asked questions about every rope, hoof, and nail on the place. Simon remained quiet, but his quiet changed shape. He showed Annie how to hold a curry brush flat against a horse's coat. He cut Caleb a small wooden whistle, then looked startled when the boy blew it until Amos threatened to cook it in the beans. He fixed Rebecca's bakery door without being asked after noticing it stuck in damp weather. He brought firewood and claimed he had cut too much. He sent extra milk because the cow had no sense of measure. Rebecca accepted what could be turned into trade. For wood, she sent pies. For milk, she mended 2 shirts and baked rolls. For the door, she told him firmly that he now had credit for gingerbread when she next had ginger. "Gingerbread," he said, as if the word belonged to another world. "You don't like gingerbread?" I don't remember." That answer stayed with her, so she made some. It took 2 weeks to gather enough molasses, ginger, and sugar without robbing other orders. On a cold Saturday, after selling nearly all her bread at market, Rebecca baked a small pan of gingerbread and carried it to the ranch, while sunset burned red along the ridge. Simon was in the corral working with a skittish colt. Rebecca stood at the fence and watched. He did not force the animal. He waited, rope loose, voice low, patience held in every line of him. The colt trembled, stepped back, stepped forward, and finally lowered its head for Simon's hand to touch its neck. Rebecca felt something inside her answer that movement. She knew what it was to tremble before a hand and not know whether it would strike or help. Simon saw her and came to the fence. "You brought something, gingerbread." His eyes changed. "Did Ellen make it?" Rebecca asked softly. He leaned one arm on the fence. "Her mother did. Ellen always burned the edges. I burned one corner. Then it's likely proper." They sat on the porch steps to eat because Amos had declared the kitchen too full of men, pretending not to be interested. The gingerbread steamed faintly in the cold. Simon took one bite and looked out toward the darkening pasture. Rebecca waited. "My mother made gingerbread the night my father came home after buying this land," he said. "I was 9. He said we would build something that outlasted hunger. Did you?" For a while, wind moved through the dry grass. "What happened to make you stop believing that?" Rebecca asked. He looked at her then, and she wondered if she had gone too far. But Simon only set the plate beside him. "I left Ellen the morning the storm came because 3 heifers were missing near the north draw. She asked me not to go. I laughed and told her cattle did not find themselves. I thought I had time. Men always think they have time until they come home to silence." Rebecca's throat tightened. "I found the house cold," he said. She had tried to bring in wood, fell near the shed. The baby came too early. Neither of them lived long enough for the doctor to reach them. The words were flat from being carried too long. Rebecca did not offer the easy comfort people gave when they wanted grief to be tidy. She did not say it was not his fault, though part of her believed it. She did not say God had a reason. She had stood at too many graves to think grief liked being explained. Instead, she sat beside him and said, "You have punished yourself every day since." His jaw tightened. "Would that be wrong?" "Yes," she said. "If punishment is all you leave the living." He looked away. She thought he might rise and end the conversation. Instead, he stayed. After a while, he said, "You speak sharp for a woman who bakes sweet things. My bread rises better when I am honest." A sound came from him, low and surprised, almost a laugh. Rebecca smiled down at her hands. That smile lasted until Monday morning, when Silas Crane walked into the bakery and placed her father's debt note on the counter like a dead bird. The bakery was full when he came. That was his way. Silas Crane rarely struck a match where no one could see the flame. Rebecca had just pulled loaves from the oven, and the front room held 6 customers waiting in line. Annie wrapped rolls in cloth. Caleb sat on a stool near the stove shelling walnuts Amos had sent from the ranch. His cough better, but not gone. The room smelled of bread, smoke, and the faint sweetness of apple turnovers cooling near the window. For the first time in months, Pruitt's bakery looked alive. Silas entered with his black hat in hand and a smile fixed under his neat mustache. "Miss Pruitt," he said, "prosperity suits you." Rebecca's stomach tightened. "Good morning, Mr. Cray." His gaze drifted over the customers, the shelves, the children, the full baskets. "Good morning indeed. I hear you have found a benefactor." Rebecca placed a loaf in Mrs. Hobart's basket. "I have found customers. One customer in particular." No one moved. Annie looked at Rebecca. Caleb stopped shelling walnuts. Rebecca kept her voice even. "Will you be buying bread, Mr. Crane?" "I might be buying the building." The front room chilled despite the oven heat. Silas laid the paper on the counter and smoothed it with gloved fingers. "Your father's debt to me has matured. My father owed Mr. Haskell. Your father owed several men. Mr. Haskell holds the store account. I hold the note against this property." Rebecca stared at the paper. She had seen it once before in Silas' office, but then he had smiled and told her not to trouble herself over legal language. She had been foolish with grief, foolish enough to believe time could be begged from a man who wanted ownership more than money. "You said I had until Christmas." I said I would consider waiting until Christmas if circumstances remained respectable. Mrs. Abel sucked in a breath, hungry for scandal. Rebecca's hands curled against her apron. My circumstances are respectable. Silas looked toward the back room, then at the children. A single woman taking late-night deliveries from a widower who has not opened his home in 7 years, riding beside him through town, spending afternoons at his ranch. Mercy Bend is generous, Miss Pruitt, but not blind. The words struck with careful aim. Rebecca felt every eye in the room turn on her. Annie stood rigid, face pale with anger. Caleb slipped from his stool and pressed against Rebecca's skirt. Silas lowered his voice just enough to make the room lean closer. I am willing to protect your name, your business, and these children. Marry me by Sunday, and I will tear up the property note. Refuse, and I file claim Monday morning. The bakery becomes mine. The children will go wherever charity can place them. Rebecca could hear her own pulse. You would use hungry children to force a marriage. I would offer order where foolish pride has made disorder. Mrs. Hubbard whispered, "The Lord forgive him," but she whispered it softly. Rebecca wanted to throw the hot loaf in his face. She wanted to snatch up the note and burn it in the oven. She wanted to be the sort of woman who could laugh at threats because she had a father, brother, husband, or bank account standing behind her. Instead, she had flour on her sleeves and a 5-year-old clutching her skirt. "No," she said. Silas' smile thinned. "Consider carefully." "I have considered. You cannot pay, not by Sunday." "Then you have no answer but yes?" A voice from the doorway said. She said no. Simon Hawthorne stood there with snow melting on his hat, brim and anger held so still. It seemed colder than the weather. The room went silent. Silas turned slowly. "This is not your affair." Simon stepped inside. "You made it public." Rebecca's heart climbed into her throat. She did not know how long he had been standing there. Long enough to hear, long enough to choose. Silas tapped the note. "This is a legal debt." "Then speak of debt, not her name." A flush crept up Silas' neck. "Careful, Hawthorne. Your history gives you little room to lecture anyone on protecting women." The room flinched. Rebecca saw Simon's face change. Not much, but enough. The old wound had been touched in public, and every person present knew it. For one awful second, she thought he would retreat behind that locked gate inside him. Instead, Simon took off his hat and looked directly at Silas. "My history taught me what it costs when a man cares more for pride than the people in his keeping," he said. "What did yours teach you?" Silas' cane struck the floor once. "This woman owes money. Sentiment will not change that." "How much?" Rebecca turned. Simon, no. He did not look away from Silas. "How much?" Silas named a sum that made the room stir. It was more than Rebecca expected. More than the bakery could earn before winter, even with miracles in every oven. Simon's jaw tightened. Silas smiled again. "Unless you carry that in your pocket, I suggest you let Miss Pruitt answer for herself." "I do answer for myself," Rebecca said. Her voice shook, but it held. "I will not marry you." Silas looked at her with real anger now. "Then you will lose everything." "No," Simon said. Rebecca looked at him. He reached inside his coat and withdrew a folded document. "I have a herd contracted to Fort Laramie in spring. I can sign against it." Silas laughed. "Spring is not money. My land is." The room changed. Rebecca felt the floor tilt under her. "No," she said, sharper this time. "You will not put your ranch against my father's debt." Simon finally looked at her. There was fear in his eyes. Not fear of Silas. Fear of the very thing he was offering. The ranch was not just land. It was the last place Ellen had lived. The place Ruth had almost been born. The punishment and memory he had chained himself to. Losing it would cost him more than money. "I can," he said. "You must not." Silas watched them both with satisfaction. "Touching, but I do not accept promises from grief-struck cattlemen trying to purchase admiration." Simon's hand curled around the document. Rebecca stepped out from behind the counter. "This is my debt and my choice." Simon said, "You think saving me means paying for me?" "No." "Then listen when I say no." The words landed hard. Simon's face closed as if she had struck him. But Rebecca could not stop. Too many men had decided her life over papers, ledgers, offers, warnings, and pity disguised as rescue. I will not pass from my father's debt to Silas Crane's control to your sacrifice, she said. If I lose this bakery, I lose it standing on my own feet. Caleb began to cry quietly. Annie put an arm around him. Simon looked at the children, then back at Rebecca. Pain and respect fought across his face. At last he turned to Silas. You will have your answer Monday. I have it now. No, Rebecca said. You have my refusal. You do not yet have my surrender. Silas gathered the note. Sunday, Miss Pruitt. He left with a bell clanging above him. One by one, customers found reasons to go. Some bought bread, some did not. Mrs. Hobart squeezed Rebecca's hand before leaving, which was kindness, but not enough to alter a ledger. When the room emptied, Simon remained. Rebecca stood with her back to the counter, shaking. I should not have offered that way, he said. No, I heard him threaten you. I know. I saw the children. I know. His voice roughened. I do not know how to stand near harm and do nothing. Rebecca's anger faltered. Simon looked down at his hat. After Ellen, I promised myself if I ever saw the storm coming again, I would not stand late in the field counting cattle while someone needed me at home. Rebecca's eyes filled. I am not Ellen, she whispered. No, he said, you are not, and you are not the man you were that day. His breath caught. For a moment, neither moved. Then Caleb coughed, and the sound brought the world back. Rebecca wiped her face with the heel of her hand. I need to work. Simon nodded. Tell me what work? She almost refused. Pride rose again, but this time she recognized fear underneath it. Fear of needing, fear of being bought, fear of letting someone close enough to leave. She looked around the bakery, at the dwindling sacks, the cracked walls, the children, the town beyond the glass. I need customers by Sunday, she said. Enough to show the bank in Cheyenne I can pay, if they buy the note from Crane. I wrote them last month. They refused because my accounts were too weak. Simon put on his hat. Then we strengthened them. How? Bread goes where hungry. That is most places. Then bake. Rebecca stared at him. That is your plan. His mouth tightened, almost amused. You wanted your feet under you. Put them by the oven. I'll rye. It was not enough. It was impossible. It was the first plan that sounded like hope. By Friday, half the county smelled Rebecca Pruitt's breath. Simon rode harder than he had in years. He took samples to line camps, ranch kitchens, the sawmill north of Mercy Bend, and a railroad crew repairing track 2 towns over. He did not charm anyone. Simon did not charm. He simply set bread on tables, named the price, and waited while hungry men tore into it. By the second bite, most were reaching for coins or promising orders. Rebecca baked until her shoulders burned. Annie washed pans, wrapped loaves, and kept accounts in a careful hand. Caleb stamped paper labels with crooked blue letters that read Pruitt's Bread, Mercy Bend. Amos came twice and took over stew so Rebecca would remember to eat. Tommy from the ranch hauled wood. Even Mrs. Hobart brought apples and stayed to peel them, muttering that Silas Crane had always looked like a man who would charge rent on a grave. Not everyone helped. Mr. Haskell refused to sell more flour until Simon paid cash in front of witnesses. Mrs. Abel warned women outside church that Rebecca was making a spectacle of herself. Silas stood daily across the street, watching wagons come and go with a patience worse than shouting. On Saturday evening, the storm arrived. It rolled down from the north in black layers, wind driving dust before rain, then rain before sleet. Mercy Bend shuddered early. Horses stamped and pulled at hitching rails. The sky went greenish over the prairie. Rebecca had one order left, 40 loaves for the railroad crew at Miller's Cut, payment on delivery. Without it, the accounts would still fall short. With it, She might have enough written contracts and cash to make the Cheyenne Bank reconsider before Silas filed claim. Simon came into the bakery as she was tying cloth over the last crate. "No," he said. She did not look up. "That is a poor greeting. You are not taking a cart out in this. The crew leaves at dawn. Then they leave hungry. They pay on delivery." "Rebecca," she tied the knot tighter. "Do not say my name like that." "Like what? Like I am already lost?" His face changed. Wind rattled the windows. Caleb slept upstairs, exhausted from coughing. Annie sat near the stove pretending to read, though her eyes moved between them. Simon lowered his voice. "Miller's Road floods in hard rain. I know the road. In daylight, in fair weather, I know what is at stake. So do I." "Then stop telling me no." He stepped closer. "I am telling you danger. And I am telling you hunger." Rebecca faced him fully. "You think I don't know the creek rises? You think I don't know that wheel could sink, or the mule could slip, or the dark could swallow the road? I know all of it. But I also know what happens Monday if I sit here safe and empty-handed." Simon dragged a hand over his face. He looked tired suddenly, more than tired, frightened. "I cannot watch you ride into weather," he said. The room went very still. Rebecca's anger gentled. "Because of Ellen." His eyes closed. "Yes, I am sorry. That does not change the sky." "No," she said. "But neither does fear." He opened his eyes. Rebecca stepped nearer, close enough now to see rain beating on his coat. "Come with me then." "Not to stop me. With me." The request stood between them, bigger than either pride or fear. Simon looked toward the window, where the storm hit the glass in silver strikes. For 7 years, weather had owned him. For 7 years, he had met every storm as a judge, returning to sentence him again. "At last," he said, "I'll hitch my team." They left Annie in charge of the bakery with Mrs. Hobart, who arrived wrapped in a shawl and carrying a shotgun she claimed was for Snake, though no snake in Mercy Bend would be fool enough to come out in sleet. Caleb slept through the departure. Simon's team was stronger than Eli's mule, and his wagon had higher wheels. Rebecca sat beside him beneath a canvas cover, while rain struck like thrown gravel. The bread crates were tied down behind them. Lightning opened the sky over the ridges, showing the road in white flashes and darkness between. For the first mile, neither spoke. Then Simon said, "The morning Ellen died, she asked for gingerbread." Rebecca turned her face toward him. "I said, I bring molasses when I came back." He continued, "I was thinking of cattle prices, fence lines, everything that could wait, though I did not know it then." Rain ran from his hat brim. "I cannot smell gingerbread." Without hearing her asked, Rebecca's throat tightened. "You ate mine." "Yes, why?" His hands held the reins steady. "Because you made it." Lightning flashed again. The words warmed and hurt at once. Before she could answer, the wagon lurched. One wheel dropped deep. The team strained. Simon pulled hard, guiding them left. But the road shoulder gave way under the rain-softened earth. The wagon tilted toward the ditch. Rebecca grabbed the seat rail. "Hold on," Simon ordered. The horses fought the harness, hooves sliding. A crate slammed behind them. One rope snapped. Bread spilled into the wet canvas. Simon jumped down into mud, nearly to his knees. "Stay there." Rebecca was already climbing after him. "Rebecca, I can tie rope." They worked in brutal rain, hands numb, boots sinking. Simon cut loose the broken rope and looped another around the axle. Rebecca dragged fallen loaves back beneath the cover, saving what she could. The team tossed their heads, frightened by thunder. Simon moved to calm them, but one horse reared, striking out. Rebecca saw the hoof swing toward him. "Simon!" He turned too late. The blow caught his shoulder and knocked him hard into the mud. The whirl narrowed to rain, horses and Simon not rising. Rebecca ran to him. "Simon!" He groaned, trying to push himself up with one arm. "Stay still, teen. I have them." "You cannot." I can. She stood, shaking not with fear now but command. She took the lead rope the way he had shown Annie, keeping low, voice steady. Easy, easy now, you're all right. The horse rolled its eyes, but Rebecca kept speaking. She did not yank. She did not plead. She waited. Trembling met Trembling in the storm, and somehow the animal heard her. When the team quieted, Rebecca tied them to a cedar and returned to Simon. His shoulder hung wrong, pain gray across his face. "It's out," she said. "I know. Can you stand? If I lie here, you'll scold me. I'll lie half." Together, slowly, they got him upright. Rebecca reset the loose crates, retied the canvas, and climbed into the driver's seat. Simon stared up at her. "What are you doing? Driving? You don't know my team. I know hungry men pay on delivery." His eyes locked on hers through the rain. Then he climbed painfully beside her. Rebecca took the reins. The creek was worse than either expected. Water tore over the ford, brown and furious, carrying branches. On the far side, lanterns glowed at the railroad camp. Simon's voice was tight with pain. "We wait, we can't, we can. The bank courier leaves town tomorrow after church. If we miss him, Silas files before word reaches Cheyenne." Simon looked at the water. "No debt is worth your life." Rebecca looked too. The current foamed around rocks, strong enough to take a wheel, a horse, a person. She thought of Annie breaking peppermint exactly in half, Caleb's saving beans in his pocket, her father hiding debt because pride had made him silent, Simon carrying grief like a sentence, every hungry table, every whisper, every door closing. Then she looked at Simon. "My life is not this bakery, but my life includes choosing whether I fight for it." He swallowed. "I'll walk the team," he said. "You can barely stand. I can stand enough." "No, Rebecca, no. Not because I don't need you. Because I do." He went still. She softened her voice. "Sit beside me. Tell me where the stones are. Trust my hands." For a man who had trusted almost nothing since a winter grave, it was the hardest thing she could have asked, but he nodded. They entered the water slow. The team leaned into the current. The wagon shuddered. Rebecca's arms strained against the reins. Simon spoke low beside her, guiding each turn, each pull, each breath. "Left now. Hold. Let them step. Good. Not too much. There's a drop. Easy. Easy." Halfway across, the current hit broadside. The wagon slid. Rebecca's heart slammed. Simon reached with his good arm, not to take the reins, but to brace her back. "Hold," he said. "You have them." She held. The wheels struck stone. The team found footing. The wagon surged forward and climbed the far bank, dripping and battered, but whole. At the railroad camp, men ran toward them shouting. Bread crates were carried inside. The foreman, a broad man named Lutz, took one look at Simon's shoulder and Rebecca's mud-soaked dress and paid double for the trouble, he said. Rebecca almost wept over the coins. They stayed long enough for the camp medic to bind Simon's shoulder. On the way back, the storm eased into cold rain. Simon leaned pale and silent beside her. Near dawn, just before Mercy Bend came into view, he said, "You were right." "About what?" "Fear does not change the sky." Rebecca looked at his bandaged arm resting stiffly against his coat. "It might keep a person from riding foolish into it, my bay." His eyes found hers. "Or from riding with someone who can help bring him through." The bakery lights were burning when they returned. Annie ran out first, shawl flying. Mrs. Hobart followed, shotgun in hand and hair wild. Caleb stood in the doorway, wrapped in a quilt, coughing and crying at once. Rebecca climbed down and held the children so tight they squeaked. Simon stood beside the wagon, pale with pain, watching them as if the sight both healed and wounded him. Then Caleb broke free and ran to him. "You came back," the boy said. Simon's face shifted. He lowered himself carefully to one knee. "Easy." Caleb put both arms around his neck, mindful of the bad's shoulder. Only after, Rebecca gasped. Simon froze, then slowly wrapped his good arm around the child. Rebecca turned away before anyone saw her tears. Sunday morning, Mercy Bend gathered after church not because they were holy, but because they were curious. Silas Crane had made sure of it. He stood near the courthouse steps with his polished cane, his black coat brushed clean, the property note tucked inside a leather folder. Mr. Haskell stood nearby, pretending discomfort. Mrs. Ebel hovered with righteous concern sharpened to a point. Ranch hands, shopkeepers, mothers, freight men, and schoolchildren filled the muddy street. Rebecca arrived, with Annie on one side and Caleb on the other. She wore her plain brown dress, mended at the cuff, and her father's watch pinned to her bodice. Her hair was neat, though one stubborn curl had escaped in the wind. She carried a packet of accounts tied with blue thread. Simon walked beside her, his injured arm bound beneath his coat. He had shaved. That small fact made half the town stare harder than the bandage. Silas smiled when they approached. Miss Pruitt, I trust your night gave you time to understand sense. It gave me time to earn money, Rebecca said. A murmur moved through the crowd. She placed the packet in the hand of Mr. Bell, the bank courier who had been delayed by the storm, and now stood near the stagecoach with a mailbag over his shoulder. These are signed orders, she said, loud enough for the street to hear. From the Hawthorne Ranch, the Millers Cut Railroad crew, the Sawmill Camp, the Bar W, and 6 town households. This is cash paid against my father's debts. This is a letter requesting purchase of the property note by the Cheyenne Bank, with repayment terms based on active accounts. Mr. Active Accounts. Bell adjusted his spectacles, surprised to find himself part theater. I can carry it. Silas laughed. A letter is not payment. No, Rebecca said, but this is. She took a cloth purse from her pocket and placed it in his hand. Coins and folded bills pressed it heavy. It is not the full debt. It is the lawful overdue portion with interest through this week. Mr. Bell will witness it. So will the town you invited. Silas' smile vanished. Mr. Haskell leaned closer. Is it enough? Silas did not answer. Rebecca looked at him steadily. You told me I had until Sunday. It is Sunday. The crowd stirred again, this time with something warmer than gossip. Silas opened the purse and counted, his gloved fingers stiff, his face darkened with each coin. This does not settle the note, he snapped. No, it prevents your claim tomorrow. Mr. Bell cleared his throat. If the overdue portion is paid within the agreed grace period, filing would be premature. Silas turned on him. You are a courier, not a judge. And you are a lender, not a husband, Simon said. The street went silent. Silas faced him. You should have stayed on your ranch, Hawthorne. I did that for 7 years. Simon stepped forward. His voice was not loud, but it carried. I kept to my land, kept to my grief. Let this town talk about a woman who worked harder than any man standing here. Let people weigh her hunger and call it character. Let a debt become a noose because it was not around my neck. Rebecca looked at him, startled. Simon's eyes moved over the crowd. I won't do that now. Mrs. Abel flushed and looked away. Silas sneered. Ere we meant to applaud? A lonely widower finds himself a baker, and suddenly he is righteous. Rebecca felt the insult strike, but before shame could rise, Simon turned to her, not to speak over her, not to rescue her without consent. He simply held out his hand, in front of everyone. The gesture was plain, open, waiting. Rebecca stared at that hand, rough and scarred. The same hand that had placed pennies on a crate without touching her pride, steadied her back in floodwater, accepted a child's horse drawing as if it were gold. Taking it would give the town more to say. Not taking it would let fear decide. Rebecca placed her hand in his. A sound moved through Mercy Bend. Surprise, disapproval, relief. It did not matter which. Simon's fingers closed gently around hers. She owes you money, he said to Silas. She does not owe you herself. Silas' mouth twisted. And you think she belongs to you? No, Simon said. I am hoping to belong beside her, if she will have me. There is a difference. Rebecca's breath caught. He looked at her then, and everything public fell away for one heartbeat. I should have asked in a kitchen, he said softly, or on a porch, or anywhere that did not smell of Crane's temper. A startled laugh broke from someone in the crowd, quickly swallowed. Simon's face remained grave. I am not asking because of debt. I am not asking because you need a roof. I am asking because when you stand in a storm, I would rather be there than safe anywhere else. I cannot promise I will never be afraid. I cannot promise I will always know how to speak. But I can promise I will not use love as a bargain, and I will not call your strength pride just because it frightens me. Rebecca's eyes fill. Annie clutched Caleb's hand. Mrs. Hobart openly wiped her face. Amos, standing near the hitching post, muttered something about onions, though there were none. Simon continued, voice rougher. Rebecca Pritz, I would be honored to court you proper, publicly, slowly, with the children's permission and your rules, and if you say no, I will still buy bread. Caleb whispered loudly, say yes to the bread part. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, gentle this time. Rebecca looked at Simon Hawthorne, the lonely cowboy who had not been perfect, who had tried once to save her by spending himself, who had listened when she told him no, who had trusted her hands in a flood, who now offered not ownership, but witness. Yes, she said. His eyes searched hers. To the courting, she added, and the bread. Simon's face changed so quietly, some might have missed it, but Rebecca saw. The old locked gate opened an inch, and morning entered. Silas snapped the folder shut. This is not finished. No, Rebecca said, still holding Simon's hand. But it is no longer hidden. Mr. Bell tucked her packet safely into his mailbag. Stage leaves in 10 minutes. Mrs. Hobart stepped forward first. I'll order 2 loaves every Wednesday. The widow in the blue bonnet raised her chin. I'll take rolls for wash day. The bar W Ranch hand called. Boss said, make it 20 biscuits twice a week, if you can keep 'em coming. One by one, not all, but enough. People began to speak. Orders, promises, apologies shaped awkwardly into purchases. Mr. Haskell coughed and said he could sell flour at standard price against signed accounts. Rebecca did not thank him more than the sentence deserved. Silas left with his cane striking mud. For the first time, people watched him go instead of her. Winter came hard that year, but not empty. The Cheyenne Bank purchased the note in November, not from kindness but from figures Annie had written straight and clean. Rebecca kept the bakery. She paid steadily. She hired Mrs. Hobart's niece 3 mornings a week and taught her how to knead dough until it felt alive under the palm. Simon kept courting the way he promised, slowly, publicly, and with more patience than polish. He came every Tuesday and Friday for ranch bread, even when snow made the road mean. He took supper in the bakery kitchen under Caleb's questioning and Annie's watchful approval. He fixed the loft ladder, then submitted to Rebecca's rule that repairs counted as repairs, not courtship, unless accompanied by flowers. The next day he brought dried wildflowers pressed in a book because snow covered the living kai. Rebecca laughed until she cried. The first time she visited the ranch after the courthouse morning, Simon led her into the kitchen and stood beside the sheet-covered cradle. I want to move it, he said. Rebecca's heart softened. Where? Not away like shame, just somewhere it can rest. Together, they carried it to the small bedroom facing east. Simon had cleaned the room. On the sill sat Caleb's horse drawing, framed in scrap wood. Annie placed a folded quilt inside the cradle, blue and yellow, stitched from pieces Ellen had once saved. No one said the room was healed. Rooms did not heal all at once. Neither did people. But the door stayed open. By Christmas, Ben no longer spoke of Rebecca only as poor Nathaniel Prout's indebted daughter, or the baker Silas Crane had nearly trapped. They spoke of her bread first, her apple rolls, her accounts, her courage at the flooded crossing, which grew in the telling until Caleb insisted she had driven through water higher than the church steeple. Rebecca always corrected him, only as high as the wagon bed. That is still high, Caleb said. Simon agreed solemnly, very high. On Christmas Eve, snow fell soft instead of cruel. The bakery glowed gold from every window. Rebecca had baked all day for half the town, and by dusk, the shelves were nearly bare, except for one pan of gingerbread, cooling behind the counter. Simon arrived with Annie and Caleb, who had spent the afternoon at the ranch, helping Amos make a wreath that looked as if a cedar tree had lost a fight. Caleb carried it proudly. Annie carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "What is this?" Rebecca asked. "For you," Annie said. Inside was a new sign, carved by Simon, painted by Annie, and smudged at one corner by Caleb. "Pritt's Bakery," it read. "Bread, biscuits, and honest warmth." Rebecca traced the letters. "Me father's name stays," she whispered. Simon stood near the doorway, snow on his shoulders. "It ought to." She looked up at him. "You made this?" "Annie painted. Caleb supervised," Caleb said, strictly. Simon added. Rebecca smiled through tears. "It is the finest sign in Wyoming territory." "We are not in Wyoming territory," Annie said. "It is still the finest there, too." They hung it the next morning, but the truest ending did not come with the sign, or the bank letter, or even the spring day when Silas Crane sold the livery and left Mercy Bend after too many borrowers began asking questions about his papers. It came in April, when the first warm wind moved over the prairie, and the town gathered for Saturday market. Rebecca stood behind her bakery table, beneath a canvas awning, setting out loaves, while Annie counted change and Caleb arranged gingerbread squares in uneven rows. Simon arrived from the ranch with his sleeves rolled and his hat pushed back, leading a wagon loaded with flour sacks he had bought at a fair price from a miller 2 towns east. People greeted him now, some still cautiously, some with real warmth. Simon answered in his spare way, but he answered. Rebecca watched him lift Caleb down from the wagon, then pause as the boy whispered something in his ear. Simon looked across the market at her. Then he walked to her table, in daylight, in front of Mercy Ben, with no crisis forcing his hand. He removed his hat. "Miss Pritt," he said. She smiled. "Mr. Hawthorne, I have come to ask if you would walk with me after market." "That sounds proper. With the children, very proper. And after that, perhaps Sunday supper at the ranch, with Amos cooking." His mouth twitched. "With you advising, that might save us." He held out his hand just as he had on the courthouse steps. This time there was no Silas, no threat, no death note, no storm. Only a market full of neighbors, a table full of bread, 2 children pretending not to stare, and a woman who had once counted pennies in a barn, believing shame was all that waited for her. Rebecca placed her hand in his. "The town saw. Let them." Simon's tone brushed gently over her knuckles, and he looked at her as if the whole prairie had gone quiet enough for one answer. "Rebecca," he said, "I am glad I found you that night." She thought of the dark barn, the empty flour sack, the coins like winter teeth, the man in the doorway who had filled her bag without emptying her pride. "So am I," she said, "but I am more glad you stay." Annie slipped her hand into Rebecca's free one. Caleb took Simon's, swinging between them as if he had arranged the whole matter from the beginning. Behind them, the new sign over the bakery caught the morning sun. Ahead, the road to the ranch waited, bright with spring mud and wild grass. The ovens were warm, the bread was rising, and for the first time in years, Simon Hawthorne walked through Mercy Ben, not as a man returning to an empty house, but as one walking toward home with his hand held in public.